Yes, so doing the Pirkei Avot against the Beit Midrash, and we're looking at a few of the Mishnah from chapter 3. Now, the first one we're looking at is either 10 or 12, depending on your translation. But it's the one from Rabbi Hanina. Yes, cool. Son of Dosa. So I'll read it out and you can adjust if it's 10 or 12. We'll see how we go. So Rabbi Hanina, son of Dosa, would say, one whose deeds exceeds his wisdom endures. But one whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, his wisdom does not endure. Oh yes, we've got copies if anyone wants to read along. So that's the first Mishnah, and I'm going to read out another one, and these two Mishnahs go hand in hand. So I've sort of... Oh, yeah, I can read that one again. Do you need to be louder, or am I okay?
What was it?
3, 10, or 12, just depending on your translation. I think Chabad says it's 12, like in their translation. But it's the one by Rabbi Hanina, son of Dosa. Yeah, it would say he. Yeah, I added that. Yeah. He would also say, one whose deeds exceed his wisdom endures. One whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, his wisdom does not endure. And then the next one I want to read is still in chapter 3, but it's either 17 or 22. And that one is by Rabbi Eliezer, son of Azariah. Yes, chapter 3, Mishnah 17. What's the page number?
106.
106. That's okay. Cool. All good. So Rabbi Eliezer, son of Azariah, thank you, would say, one whose wisdom is greater than his deeds, what is he comparable to? To a tree with many branches but few roots. Comes a storm and uproots it, and turns it on its face. As it's stated, he shall be as a lone tree in a wasteland, and shall not see when good comes. He shall dwell parched in the desert, a salt land uninhabited. But one whose deeds are greater than his wisdom, to what is he compared? To a tree with many roots and few branches, whom all the storms in the world cannot budge from its place. As is stated, he shall be a tree planted upon water, who spreads his roots by the river, who fears not when comes heat, whose leaves is ever lush, who worries not in a year of drought, and ceases not to yield fruit. So those two missions very much go hand in hand. They're both about wisdom and how it is or isn't applied. But I thought I'd start with a question for you guys, because I'm going to get you involved again, so that's okay. And it's just going to be a group question, this one. Oh yeah, I need someone to run the mic. Thank you. And the question is, what impact does our intentions have on our study of the Torah? So to clarify, when we study the Torah, what are our intentions and what impact does that intention have on us actually taking in the Torah and living it?
So what I was talking about earlier, if we're studying Torah and doing Torah to be saved, I mean, that's probably a wrong intention, but sometimes we can approach it that if I do Torah, God's going to love me and therefore I'm going to be, saved.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
To know him and to know his ways.
Yeah, that's an example of a good intention. Yeah.
It helps us to walk in righteousness.
Yeah, good answer. Yes.
So really our intentions actually influence the outcome of our Torah study.
Yes.
I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes, that's what I'm sort of hinting at.
Yeah. But if I'm studying Torah to be saved, I've got the wrong intention, and that outcome is not going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
Because as we said this morning, our salvation is not based on Torah, but it's based on trust. So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, that sort of sums up where I'm going. So you guys already mentioned some of those intentions. And yeah, they're pretty much some of the things I was thinking about. So like you said before, you can have the intention to know how to act, to know how to walk out Torah and how to live. That's a good intention. But you can also have the intention of how to get wealth and honor, how to get power, and also wanting an academic pursuit. So there's like a few different intentions people can have when they come to reading Torah. But if our intentions to learn an action or a mitzvah outweigh all those other intentions, so some of those intentions are just natural inclinations, like when you read something you're interested in, You can't help but get academically stimulated by it. Sometimes there are nuggets of truth about how to have wealth and honor and power within the Torah, especially the Proverbs. So those aren't necessarily bad on its own. It's when our intention to actually learn how to perform a mitzvah and act it out outweigh all those other intentions. That's when wisdom actually has a lasting effect. If those other intentions are higher than our intention to actually learn how to live Torah, then they don't really last. And from like a really surface level, that's because our thoughts and knowledge, they die with us. Academic pursuit and academic thoughts and like the enjoyment of learning something sort of dies when we die. Doesn't really exist unless we do something with it. But with action comes impact on the world around us, and that leaves a legacy that continues on for generations and generations. So that's a really surface level. Yep.
I just want to reaffirm what you're saying, because after the first and second temple, the men of the Great Assembly got together and said, how can we survive, or how can we continue to implement the Torah? And they just didn't say, well, we should read a lot.
Yeah.
We should just study a lot. They said, hey, we should get together, we should pray, we should do charity, we should learn the Torah definitely, and we should make it in our communities, in our families, in our communities, we should make it a lifestyle, because then it will live on.
Yes.
So
yeah, definitely. Thanks. And James, in James 2:14-26, there's this similar discussion about the idea that if faith, so things we believe, are not followed by mitzvah, then they're dead. So like there's already a bit of a discussion in the New Testament amongst the apostles about this idea that knowledge is useless without actually putting it into practice. Yeah.
Conversation actually that Kane Duncan and Judith and I were having in the car about, it's easy to do things like medicine and nursing because the idea is that people should be healed. So you go, I'll learn how to heal people. And that becomes a mission and a goal. And you can see how even different denominations, we might not agree with everything they do, but Catholics were like, well, we have to set up hospitals then so people can be healed because that's what we're called to do. That's a belief then followed by a list of actions and ongoing research and ideals that have helped society develop.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like the pursuit of medicine wouldn't really exist if Socrates, what's the Hippocrates? Hippocrates had decided that he had a thought about an oath and then didn't pass it on. So it's really about maintaining a continued expression of Torah. Did you guys want to break into groups, or did you want to just do a whole? Yeah, we'll just do a whole thing. So another question I have for you guys is, so we discussed some of the consequences just now of what happens when you do and don't let your knowledge grow larger than your application. But I suppose I wanted to dig in a bit deeper and start looking at the consequences of letting your knowledge grow larger than your application of knowledge. So having thoughts but not doing anything with it, like what are the consequences of that for ourselves and for our community? Yeah, that's okay. So I suppose I want to discuss what the consequences are of letting our knowledge grow larger than our actions. The things it's not just about knowing, but it's about doing so you can shine that light, because no light is like, if a light is hid under a basket, then no one sees it. So our actions have to actually speak our knowledge. And also the idea that these things that we learn, we then put into place so that we can have that cleansing, maybe not so much a cleansing like Yeshua has done for us, but like a ritual cleansing, and also an opportunity to set our path away from one thing to another. So there is that cleansing that comes with application of Torah. And I suppose to look at the opposite, if Torah is only learned and not applied, then we do become like that small sect of the Pharisees who were hypocrites, and people look at us and think, well, if they're representation of God, and that is what God looks like, then why would I want to worship an evil God? So it's actually quite a dire situation if we don't. Yeah. Oh, yeah, David?
Just on your question, Daniel, I guess one core outcome based on what we're reading in Pirkei Avot, where it says his wisdom does not endure. So since, and this is based on the commentary, so since his wisdom prevents him from following the whims of his heart, he despises it and is fed up with it and leaves it. So if we have so much wisdom rather than actually the fear of sin or the fear of Hashem, that is a good fear, then and we fail to actually act, and it becomes so much knowledge or so much wisdom, and the danger is that we will get fed up with it and just leave, which is something that none of us want in our lives.
Yeah, and it's something I've seen. I've seen in individuals' lives where they gather so much knowledge to the point where they've learned everything there is to learn, and then I'll move on to the next thing because it's no longer like useful to them because all they wanted was knowledge.
Yeah, and do you think like in verse 1 it starts off, if it tells you how to not go into sin, and basically that first verse, chapter 3, verse 1 of Pirkei Avot is really saying, do these three things, and it was really know where you came from, where you're going, and who you're going to be giving an account to, and really just stay humble really the whole time and have humility.
Yeah, definitely. And we sort of touched on it before that we're all made of dust. I think that's the one where it says we're made from a putrid drop. Yeah, so even like bringing it a little bit more humbling than dust, like we're like, just gross.
Putrid dust, Daniel, they actually said semen, that we're as small as a little dot, that's just come from nothing.
Yeah, I was assuming that's what they were applying. So it's humbling, yes.
I was thinking, I guess you've already touched on that, but it's like a farmer who gets all these seeds, but then doesn't produce the food from it. So no one benefits from all that knowledge.
Yes.
And so he starves, and everyone around him starves because he could plant that knowledge as the seeds, obviously, in the field and produce something with it, but nothing happens. And then it's all wasted. The seeds have potential but never go anywhere.
Yeah, it's vanity.
Yeah.
Nice. Keith, go for it.
Daniel, it's along the lines of the people that were given talents, and some of the people did well and increased their talents, whereas one just buried his talent. If you've got a lot of knowledge and you're not sharing it, you're damaging yourself.
Mm-hmm. You've read my notes? No, it's a really good point though, and that's literally what I'm about to get into. So thank you for the segue. So the bit that I'm going to talk about now is it's more of a sketch of a thought rather than a complete picture, and something maybe worth exploring in greater detail another time. But I was, actually thinking of using Yeshua's parable of the talents as a way of illustrating the relationship between knowledge and wisdom. So there are some similarities there. It's not necessarily like a perfect fit, but you can use it to illustrate that idea that, actions and knowledge like have consequences. Does someone want to read Matthew 25:14-30? If not, I've got it here. I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
For it will be like a man about to leave home for a while, who entrusted his possessions to his servants. To the one he gave 5 talents, equivalent to 100 years' wages, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, to each according to his ability. Then he left. The one who had received 5 talents immediately went out, invested it, and earned another 5. Similarly, the one given 2 earned another 2. But the one given 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of the servants returned to settle accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing the other 5, and said, Sir, you gave me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 more. His master said to him, Excellent. You are a good and trustworthy servant. You have been faithful with a small amount, so I will put you in charge of a large amount. Come and join in your master's happiness. Also, the one who had received 2 came forward and said, Sir, you gave me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 more. His master said to him, Excellent. You are a good and trustworthy servant. You have been faithful with a small amount, so I will put you in charge of a large amount. Come and join in your master's happiness. Now the one who had received 1 talent came forward and said, I knew you were a hard man. You harvest where you didn't plant and gather where you didn't sow seed. I was afraid, so I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, take what belongs to you. You wicked, lazy servant, said the master. So you knew, did you, that I harvest where I haven't planted, and that I gather where I didn't sow seed? Then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would at least have gotten back interest with my capital. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10. For everyone who has something will be given more, so that he will have more than enough. But from anyone who has nothing, even what he does have will be taken away. So for this worthless servant, throw him out in the dark, where people will wail and grind their teeth.
Thank you. So if we're using that parable and we're sort of saying that the talents is Torah knowledge, then the consequences of not having your knowledge grow into action, touching, multiply, is exile, a personal exile in this case. And it depends like how the rest of that chapter is read, whether that's a permanent exile or whether it's a temporary one. That's a little bit beyond what we want to look at today, but basically being thrown out of, thrown out into the darkness. So it's pretty heavy. And you sort of see that as a pattern, like history throughout the nation of Israel, right? Exile seems to be, exile finds itself as a result of Israel not Israel not applying what they've learned. So it's when there isn't justice, when there isn't peace, when there isn't the appropriate worship of Adonai, when there isn't a reverence for his Torah and what he has given to the nation, then after that exile is the result. And actually, it's interesting because if you keep reading that chapter, Yeshua, when he returns, chastises those among the nations of earth who don't treat the least of these as if they were from Adonai himself or Yeshua himself. So it's a real call to action to remember that it's not good enough to know that how to live, but you really have to apply it for it to make a difference. So another question. What does the application of Torah look like? Sorry, David, go for it.
Okay, here's the answer you've been waiting for. No, so in this week's parasha, Vayikra and Kadoshim, we have that one of the answers that all the Torah is commentary, and this is what Torah is, and that is in Leviticus 19, verse 18, Vahavta l'recha kamocha, you shall love your fellow as yourself, and which sounds really, like, I mean, that's the ideal, and the Chazal talks about how to do that, and the practicality of it, and there's some really good, I guess, practical ways. This one guy says, Rabbi Ha-Kesav Ve'ha-Kabbalah, he offers a list of examples, and I won't say them all, but a couple are, your affection for others should be real, don't fake it. Always treat others with respect. Always seek the best for them. Join in their pain. Greet them with friendliness. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Assist them physically, even in matters that are not very difficult. Be ready to assist with small or moderate loans and gifts. Do not consider yourself better than them.
Yep. Yeah, that's really well spoken. And you've touched on sort of my answer. You've touched on part of my answer. It's what does the application Torah look like? Love God and love others. Yeah, definitely. Which sort of sums up the whole Torah, but it also sometimes brings a conflict for us or for me. And I was actually reading a social justice commentary on the Pirkei Avot by Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz. I think I pronounced that right. Yeah, thank you. He asks the question, what counts as good deeds for you? Have you experienced how a focus on external service can come at expense of more reflective practice, or the opposite? And what are the implications of each of these conflicts? So I had a really good think about that. And I raised some questions personally, and I reflected upon it. And I suppose for me, I find that there is more of a focus on external service, the love of others, sometimes to the neglect of the love of Adonai. So there's that conflict that we have to keep this balance. So like we spoke about it a few weeks ago, that I think it goes back to chapter 1, Mishnah 2. The world stands on three things: study of Torah, divine service, and acts of loving kindness. So it's this tripod, but it's a very delicate tripod. And if you favor one leg over the others, everything is bound to collapse. So it's you can't really love others if you don't understand how God loves others. If you just think, I'm going to love others how I understand how each person looks. And you can't really love Adonai if you don't do divine service to him. If you don't then love the people that he created. And then you can't really study the Torah if you don't then apply it. It's not study, it's just reading. Yeah. But like talking about exile and then like this delicate balance, it's not all despair. So I read Roch Chaim's commentary on chapter 3, 17, and he mentioned that so trees can be planted, but they can also be replanted. So this is really a chance to let ourselves be replanted in greater proximity to the path or the river of Torah. This comes by, as we mentioned last week, aligning our will with Adonai, which then impacts our emotions and our actions. So where we put our thoughts and desires, everything else follows. So it's a matter of planting ourselves a little bit closer to God's own thoughts and desires. So that's all I've got, but I am open to any comments, questions, and things like that. Yep.
I can't remember where it is. I think it's in Leviticus somewhere. It talks about following the mitzvah, keeping the Torah, and then it talks about God walking in the camp of Israel and actually physically walking on earth. And it talks about the wild beasts not attacking people.
Yeah.
So I guess part of that, going back to the question, what Torah looks like. Well, sometimes it's not exactly clear. Like it is clear what you should do. There's halakha, there's ways, but sometimes the feedback we get from the world around us is what following Torah should look like. So if there's a change in the environment, then that's like the barometer that your mitzvot is hitting the heavens, as it were, hitting the target. Which is what Torah means, right? You're hitting the target because the world around you is responding to closeness to Hashem.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. If you're following Torah and the impact you make is quite negative around you, then there's a good chance to stop and reflect and think, is there something wrong with my intention or my thought or my perception of Torah? It is a good barometer. It's not always, because there will be times when you do the right thing. The world will arc up because it's in conflict to their in conflict with how they want to skirt around the law to pursue a personal belief or a personal goal. Often beliefs over like everyone seem to line up somewhat. There's like many commonalities, but often it's that when people are acting on their own self-interest and you're acting on others' interests, there's a conflict because all of a sudden you're taking away that person's ability to take for themselves. If you start like giving to people and being kind to everyone, it disrupts the balance of things. Yeah. Yeah, go for it, Keith.
I think probably the best act of loving kindness is when you do something for other people and you know that there's absolutely no way they could ever return a favor to you.
Yeah, that's pure selflessness.
That's correct.
Oh, Gordon, do you have anything? No, that's okay.
I just wanted to comment on the replanting of the tree, which is this, while our Heavenly Father has absolutes, He filters everything through mercy. And He is a God of second, third, and fourth chances. And this tree can be replanted and be nourished with the right nourishment. So I think we're sometimes very closed in our own thoughts, and we limit God all the time.
No, definitely, because trees can't really replant themselves either. Like you can want to be replanted and you can reach your roots out to where the water is, but someone has to like help you get there. Whereas the tree who has like amazing branches everywhere, but like is somewhere isolated in the desert with not near stream, with really weak roots, they've put themselves in a position where there isn't anyone there to help them move. They're surrounded by desert and uninhabited lands. So. Yes, it's the end result. It's a little bit of both. That tree looks really great at first out there by itself, but then it dies without the water and community. Which then results in exile. Yes, Chris and Sarah.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to bring up how in quite a lot of Hasidic stories, there's people that break halakha in order to make sure that someone else inherits a place in the world to come. There was, I think, a story about, it wasn't even about the world to come. There was a guy who, I don't know, he wasn't doing something properly in regards to leaving his, I think his carriage or something like that. And when he came and met this rabbi in some public place, the rabbi just yelled at him, like, "You fool, why would you just leave your stuff like that? Don't you know that it can get stolen," or something like that? And some guy spoke to the rabbi and said, "Don't you know that if you embarrass someone, you're going to lose your share in the world to come?" And the rabbi is like, "Yeah, you think I don't know that? I'm giving up my share so that this man can make sure that his life is in order." because otherwise, something bad might happen to his stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's a good example of loving kindness. And there's quite a few other stories like there's the Baal Shem Tov who was he was asked to pray for someone's daughter to be healed from sickness, and then an angel came and said that it's too late. She's been declared by God that she would die anyways, and you should just give up on praying. And the Baal Shem Tov didn't give up. He just kept praying and praying, and the angel came back again. You know what? If you keep praying, we're gonna remove your share in the world to come. And he kept praying anyways. And the angels decided that apparently the decree was switched around so that he would lose his share in the world to come, and then the girl would be healed. And then she was healed, and the Baal Shem Tov was actually grateful. He said that, I'm grateful that I've lost my share, because now I'm not worshiping God for a reward, but out of love for him completely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. That's the that's the idea of like to save a life is the greatest commandment. It's like the center of the love others. So if you need to like do something a bit drastic to save someone else, then that's the ultimate act of love. And that's really what we see through our Messiah, Yeshua. Yeah. It's very much a gospel. Yeah.
They seem like extreme calls, Chris, but that's what our master, that's what our rabbi told us to do, to love your
life for a friend.
lay your life down for a friend. Ooh,